It always starts the same way. Quiet. A kind of stillness that feels wrong. Like the air itself is waiting for something to happen. Imagine you're driving home one night, the streets empty, the radio barely whispering static. The orange glow of Halloween decorations flashes past your window. Smiling pumpkins, fake cobwebs, plastic skeletons. But in between those flashes, for a second, you swear you see someone standing on the sidewalk, not moving, just staring. When you look again, they're gone. That feeling, that sharp twist in your gut when you realize something isn't right. That's where every real horror story begins. Not with monsters, not with ghosts, but with something familiar that suddenly feels off. Like a sound in your own house that you can't explain. Or the way the lights flicker just once, right before you feel the air move behind you. I used to think Halloween was just harmless fun, candy, costumes, maybe a few jump scares. But then I started hearing stories. Not urban legends, not campfire tales, but accounts from real people. People who swore they experienced something no one could explain. The kind of stories that make you question what's hiding in the corners of your own life. One story came from a woman who lived alone in an old house. Creaky floors, drafty windows, the usual. Every Halloween, she'd hear footsteps in the attic. She thought it was rats until she found footprints. Bare, human footprints, dusty, small, like a child's. But she never had kids. Another came from a man who worked late shifts. Every night that week, as he left the building, he'd see the same figure under a streetlight, never moving, never speaking, until the night he waved. The figure waved back, with his own exact motion. You tell yourself there's an explanation. There always is. Until there isn't. Until you realize the camera you set up in your living room caught something you didn't see with your own eyes. Until you play it back and notice a shadow bending in the wrong direction. Until you see your reflection blink when you didn't. The thing about true horror is it doesn't announce itself. It doesn't roar or scream. It creeps. It waits. It lets you get comfortable, makes you believe you're safe. And then, just when your guard drops, it reminds you that you're not alone. Tonight, we're going to explore 5 stories like that. Stories that don't belong to any movie, that can't be dismissed as fiction. Each one is true, told by the people who lived through them and barely walked away the same. Some of them don't even know how to explain what they saw. They just know it happened. So wherever you are right now, maybe you're watching this in your room, maybe your lights are dim, maybe there's a sound outside you're trying to ignore. Just remember, horror doesn't wait for permission. Sometimes it's already there, watching you, waiting for its moment to begin. These aren't stories passed down through rumor or twisted into internet myths. These are the kind of accounts that come from people who had everything to lose by telling them. No one wants to believe something impossible happened to them. They just can't ignore what they saw, what they felt, what they still can't forget. Every one of the stories you're about to hear was told by someone who looked me straight in the eye and said, "I wish this wasn't true." That's the thing about real horror. It doesn't come dressed in makeup or special effects. It happens in ordinary moments. You're brushing your teeth, locking the door, scrolling through your phone before bed. The world feels normal. But then something shifts. The sound doesn't match the movement. The reflection doesn't match your face. The door you know you closed isn't. And when you try to explain it, people smile, nod, and tell you you're tired. You want to believe that. You really do. But when you wake up the next morning and the marks are still on the door or the message is still written on the fog, Giad mirror, that's when you realize this isn't something you imagined. The first time I heard one of these stories, it came from a police officer, someone who had seen everything. He told me about a Halloween night call years ago, a disturbance in a small neighborhood. He arrived to find the house dark, the door half open, and the faint sound of a child crying inside. He went in, searched every room, checked every closet. Nothing. Just an old rocking chair moving on its own. He thought it was the draft until he felt something brush past him. Later, reviewing his body cam footage, he noticed a small handprint appear on his shoulder, one that wasn't there before. These are the details that don't make it into police reports, the details people keep to themselves because they don't want to sound crazy. But the truth doesn't care about sounding believable. The truth just exists. A mother in Michigan still refuses to let her kids go trick-or-treating after what happened one Halloween night. A group of college students in Oregon packed up and left their rental after 1 week, and none of them will talk about why. A retired firefighter from Texas says he quit after an emergency call that led to an abandoned house filled with voices. No one else heard them. But when they played back the radio recordings, something whispered his name. They didn't want money. They didn't want fame. They just wanted someone to hear them. Someone who wouldn't laugh, someone who wouldn't try to explain it away. And that's why these stories matter. Because they aren't about fiction or fantasy. They're about moments that leave people forever changed. So when you hear what happened next, understand this. These are not campfire tales. They're real events that happened to real people. And the only reason you're hearing them now is because they survived long enough to tell them it never hits you all at once. It starts small, so small you almost miss it. A sound you can't place, a flicker of movement in your peripheral vision, the kind of thing you brush off without thinking, because that's what we do. We rationalize, we explain, we tell ourselves, it's just the wind, it's just the house settling, it's nothing. But deep down, there's a moment, a brief, quiet moment, when your body knows something your mind refuses to accept. That's the moment the fear starts to build. Slowly, carefully, like a whisper crawling through the dark. One of the stories I heard began with a man hearing footsteps above his ceiling. He lived alone, so he assumed squirrels had gotten into the attic. For days, the steps continued, soft, deliberate pacing he called pest control. They found nothing. He put it out of his mind. But one night, as he lay in bed, the footsteps stopped directly above him. Then 3 slow knocks, perfectly in rhythm with his heartbeat. He never slept in that room again. Another came from a woman who noticed her dog wouldn't go near the hallway after midnight. He'd growl at the empty air, tail between his legs, eyes locked on something she couldn't see. The first time, she laughed it off. The second time, she took a video, and when she played it back, there was a faint voice whispering her name. See, real terror doesn't announce itself with screaming violins or slamming doors. It builds inside you. It turns familiarity into threat. The same hallway you've walked down 1,000 times suddenly feels too long. The air feels heavy, like someone's holding their breath just out of sight. There's this pattern you start to notice in every story. It always begins with something harmless. A misplaced item, a strange noise, a door found slightly open. Then the pattern changes. Things escalate in ways that don't make sense. A clock stops at the same time every night, a phone rings once but no number appears. You start to feel like the world around you is testing how much you'll ignore before you finally acknowledge it. That's when people start hearing their names whispered in empty rooms. That's when they see shadows move when there's no light to cast them. And it's always the same thing they say after. It didn't feel like a ghost. It felt like something watching, waiting. By the time you realize it's not your imagination, it's already too late. You're no longer observing the strange, you're part of it. The knocks come closer, the reflection lingers a second too long, you reach for the light switch. But for a moment the darkness feels alive, and you hesitate, that hesitation, that half second, before you turn on the light. That's where the real horror lives. Not in what's seen, but in what's just about to reveal itself. And once it does, you can never unsee it. Every one of these stories happened to someone who never saw it coming. Normal people, people like you and me. They weren't ghost hunters or thrill seekers. They weren't chasing danger, they were just living their lives until something unimaginable found its way into them. One woman I spoke to lived in a small town, the kind where everyone knows everyone, where you leave your doors unlocked because you trust your neighbors. Her name was Clara. She worked at a bakery, took care of her elderly mother, and loved decorating her porch every Halloween. The night it happened, she'd set out a bowl of candy with a handwritten note that said, "Take one." Around midnight, she heard the bowl tip over. She went to the door expecting kids. What she saw was a figure standing at the edge of her yard, too tall, too still. It wasn't wearing a costume, just watching, she called out. It didn't move. Then slowly, it turned and walked into the woods. She told herself it was just a prank. The next morning, she found a piece of paper tucked into the candy bowl. Said, "Thank you for waiting." Then there was Aaron, a college student, roommates, late nights, cheap pizza, all of it. His story started as a dare, spend Halloween night in an abandoned farmhouse outside town. They laughed, packed flashlights, recorded everything. Around 2 a.m., they heard someone walking upstairs. But when they went to check, there was no upstairs, just a ceiling. Later, when Aaron watched the footage back, he saw a hand reach over his shoulder, a hand none of his friends saw in person. He dropped out of school a few months later, said he couldn't sleep in buildings anymore, said he still feels that hand sometimes. It's easy to think these are just characters, pieces of a story, but they're not. These were people who cried, who tried to explain, who begged others to believe them. And the places, they weren't haunted houses on cliffs or decaying asylums. They were regular homes, apartments, dorm rooms, gas stations, places you've probably been. One story came from a young mother who lived in a second-floor apartment with her baby daughter. She used to read to her every night before bed. The baby would giggle and reach toward the corner of the room, smiling at something unseen. Cute, she thought. Until one night the baby started crying. Not like normal crying, but gasping, terrified. The baby monitor caught a soft humming sound, the same lullaby she used to sing. But her lips weren't moving. These weren't people looking for stories to tell, they were people trying to forget them. trying to rebuild their lives around a truth they can't explain. Their fear wasn't cinematic, it was quiet, private, and inescapable. And when they spoke about it, there was always the same look in their eyes, that distant, hollow stare of someone who's been touched by something they can't unfeel. Something that didn't just happen to them, but stayed. The funny thing about fear is that it teaches us more about ourselves than comfort ever could. The same is true with money, business, or success. You don't really know what you're made of until you're staring straight into uncertainty. These stories, as dark and unsettling as they are, carry something valuable underneath all that dread. They remind us that life isn't built on guarantees. It's built on awareness, on noticing what others overlook, on paying attention to the quiet things that everyone else dismisses. Think about it. Every one of those people ignored the first sign that something was wrong. They heard the footsteps, saw the shadow, felt the unease, but they shrugged it off because it didn't fit the pattern of what should happen. That's how most of us live. We build routines, we get comfortable, we stop paying attention. And when something doesn't add up, we explain it away because the truth feels too disruptive. But ignoring the small things, whether it's a strange sound in the night or a red flag in a deal, is what leads to disaster. In business, I've seen people lose fortunes not because they made one bad decision, but because they ignored 20 small warning signs along the way. Fear works the same way. It's not always an enemy. Sometimes it's information. It's your instincts tapping you on the shoulder saying, "Hey, something's not right here." Most people silence that voice. The wise ones listen. There's also another lesson hiding in these stories. The idea that what's real isn't always what's visible. In investing, you can look at numbers all day long, but it's the unseen, character, integrity, patience, that determines outcomes. In life too, it's what you can't see that often matters most. The unseen motives of people around you, the unseen risks behind quick rewards, the unseen consequences of ignoring what you know deep down to be true. Those who survived the horrors in these stories all did one thing differently. They trusted what they felt, even when they couldn't explain it. They moved when it didn't make sense to move. They got out when everyone told them to stay. That's not superstition.